everybody, and welcome to another one in our long-running series of financial wellbeing podcasts, where three of us come together and shoot the breeze about all things financial related to our well-being, both our own well-being and the well-being of the many people that tune in to listen to the podcast. My name's David Lloyd. I try and hold together this loose ragtag and bobtail set of people and try and make sense of everything with limited success. And I'm joined by two people who absolutely know what they're talking about. Tom Morris, you know what you're talking about, but who are you?
Who am I? Director and Chartered Financial Planner over at Ovation Finance in Bristol, who support this podcast. And because it's going to be relevant to the podcast, proud father of two and loving husband.
Excellent. Yes, we'll find out more about that later on, I'm sure. And Chris, tell us a little bit, just a little bit about yourself, or a lot if you prefer.
I'm 6'1", 57 years old, amenable. I'm also the I don't know what the right word is, launcher, creator of the Financial Wellbeing Pulse, which I would like to give a quick mention to, if I may. If you are a financial advisor who wants to measure the financial wellbeing of your clients, you can use the Financial Wellbeing Pulse. And if you're a person who's not a financial advisor, ask your financial advisor why on earth they aren't using it with you, and get them to come and buy it.
Now, Chris, you've mentioned this before. We've talked about this in a previous podcast. So, Tom, are you using this at all in your in your work yet?
We are, and I'm glad your memory is so good, as we've used it with you, David.
I refer the gentleman to my comments about what age old starts in the last podcast.
I know that. I was just giving you an opportunity to talk about it rather than make it all about you and me. I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain what you do in your...
we are...
Well saved.
Yeah, well done. We are rolling it out, and it's been very enlightening, I think, for me so far. I'm very fortunate, or we're very fortunate at Ovation, that we've been involved in financial well-being for a long time. So we think that we know the areas that people need to work on, but what's really telling from some of the results is, right, you had this niggling feeling that this was an area that needed pushing more. There's your proof. Go for it. Or there might have been areas that you might have had a bit of a blind spot on, that we've delved into some conversation with clients. And I think it's really guided the conversations and guided the actions from the back of it really helpfully, and made sure we're focusing on the right areas for that individual in that moment of time.
Great. Okay. Now, this episode, we're having an interview. Now, normally, Chris Budd does the interviews, does them very well, if I may say so. I think I may say so. I think he's allowed me to say that. He does very good interviews. But this time, we've got a different interviewer. Tom, you've done the interview. Now, perhaps you guys could explain how and why this has come about.
So should we tell the truth, Chris?
No, lie. Go on, lie. I don't mind.
So we'll allude to it in the interview, but Chris met a lady called Katie Dow, who is an advisor in the United States, who does a lot of work with young parents. And we thought it'd be really interesting. You met at a conference in San Diego where she was talking about this subject, and I thought she'd be a really interesting podcast guest. Well, Chris said, well, why don't we interview you? I'll bring Tommo along because he's a young parent. It'd be really good to get some of his views, have a good conversation between the three of us. Well, we get to the interview date, ready to start, and Chris's technology completely failed at him. So it led to me making my financial wellbeing podcast interview and debut. So there you go. That's the real story behind it. But I think it lent itself well, given the subject material.
You did a brilliant job, mate. Honestly.
Well, we'll let the listeners decide that in a moment, won't we?
We will indeed. In fact, why hang around? Why don't we cut to the chase? So just tell us again who it is you're interviewing, Tom.
Katie Dow, who, as I said, is an advisor in the States. I believe her firm, and I'm going to have to remind myself, that's right, Aspen Capital Management. So yeah, she was great fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed having a chat with her. So hopefully you guys enjoy the listen when we get there.
Well, let's get there now.
Hi there, Katie. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. And as I alluded to before we hit the record button, you are actually my interview debut.
Yes, I am happy. I am here for it. Let's do this, Tom. I mean, we'll do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And with any luck, I'll be better than Chris, and then he'll just be, put to the sideline and never asked to do it again. There we go. No. Thank you for coming. Look, just give a bit of background. You and Chris met at a conference in San Diego where you were both talking, and in particular, you were talking about um, financial planning and those were young children and stress. So we're going to delve into that. But before we do, it'd be really great to hear about your background and kind of how you got to the position you're in today.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to not like bore you half to death with my own story, but it's a little bit longer because I kind of got here in a roundabout way. So, I started my career in banking, and I worked in banking for about a decade, and I loved banking. I was in real estate lending at first, and then I kind of rolled into a more managerial position. I was managing a couple different branches, hiring teams, producing, advising on a little bit more than just real estate. But what I found with that, it was very transactional. And I didn't get to build like the relationships that I wanted for a long period of time. It was really lucrative. So I was able to save some money at a young age. And I kind of saw how that changed me. And I didn't come from money. So, like, it was interesting from a personal evolution standpoint. But my actual job was very stressful, very transactional, and dealing with really high emotions. So this is something that I don't think you'll be expecting. So I got married. My husband's a dreamer, and one day he walked into our brand new home that we built, and it was beautiful. We'd been in it for about 2 weeks, and he was like, "Hey, honey, I think we should go live on a ship." And I was like, "A ship? What do you mean a ship? We've never even been on a ship." And a woman where we lived had started the first ever social impact cruise line, which was picked up by Carnival Corporation. So Carnival Corporation owns Princess Cruises, Holland America Line, Carnival Cruise Line, like 7 different brands. They started a social impact cruise line brand called Fathom. And she was looking for somebody to lead the experience on board, and she needed a couple. And so she hired my husband and I, and we quit our jobs and we went and lived on a cruise ship. We took travelers into the Dominican Republic and into Cuba, and we did social impact projects there. So it was a vacation, but you could like wake up and you could go to the buffet, and then you could go out and you could build water filters for families that didn't have access to clean water, or you could pour concrete floors for people that lived on dirt floors. And then in the afternoon, you could go zip lining and you could karaoke all night, and then the next morning do something else. So we did that for a while. And I would say that that experience really opened my heart to a different side of relationships and just a different side of human behavior. And kind of this idea of you don't have to have all of this money or wealth in order to be happy. We met the most wonderful, loving, caring, happy people in what we would say were really poor areas of the world. And so that kind of changed me when we moved kind of back to the States and we wanted to start a family. I found myself looking for something that was a little bit deeper than just a transactional relationship. And then I found myself into holistic wealth management with a private independent firm out of Boise, Idaho.
Amazing. And I think the listeners will now understand why you and Chris hit it off when you met each other at the conference. So there you go. That makes an awful lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really, really helpful. You spoke, and you've alluded to it there, you spoke in particular at the conference about financial planning with young children, I believe, if you have young children and the stresses that brings on. And I believe your specialism is in supporting families or young families. Is that fair to say?
So I would say my specialization, Tom, is really in young, busy families. And
Mm-hmm.
likely they have young kids. I mean, if you've got two people in a partnership, a marriage that are both working full time, they have young kids, like really working with them to not only help them alleviate some of the stresses that they're feeling at home, but also get organized and processed so they can feel like their finances are just not getting pushed to the side, but they actually have a plan. So I'll tell you kind of how I got to this topic though. So I had my first baby in 2020 in COVID, and my husband was working full time. I was working full time as a financial advisor. Fast forward to 2021, we had a 6-month-old. And I decided to start my master's program through K-State. So I was getting my master's degree in financial planning with a young child. My husband's working full time. I'm also working full time. Start a 2-year program. And then about 6 months in, I realized I was pregnant, which was crazy. So I was pregnant, have a toddler, working, trying to juggle all of these things. And I started doing what a normal person might do, is just like processing externally to anybody that would listen. So just having conversations about how to handle everything. And what I found is a lot of people would listen to my story and then have something similar around the stresses of bringing a new baby or having really young kids and how it was stressing their marriages. And it usually had to revolve around money, and it didn't like directly correlate, but like always in some ancillary way. So and daycare. I don't even know what to do about daycare. Daycare is $1,000 a month in the States for my one child, and we're going to have this next one. And how are we going to afford that? Or, I really want to stay at home, but my husband doesn't want to. So a lot of these conversations. And so in my master's program, I was like, I need to research this. There should be a better way, or something that we can deliver to people that are going through something similar that can help them have a better experience, mitigate financial stress so they can enjoy this amazing gift of a child in their home.
Yeah. Again, probably the listeners will understand why we're having this conversation, because what you've just expressed really reflects my own experiences. And why I'm really fascinated to have this conversation. You started alluding to some of the different financial effects that people with young children are confronted with. What are common ones that you see come up that they have to start thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, Tom, you will know, I think, and it would be interesting to hear what you and your wife felt, but a lot of common stressors that I hear about is budgetary. Like, how are we going to mold in this new child and all the costs, but also time budget constraints, really busy families that want to be there for their kids, but don't know how to do that appropriately. And there's a lot of stress around there. And then preparation for not only today, but future. That comes with a lot of stress. Are we doing enough? What are we going to do for education? Are we educating our kids today appropriately? Should we go to private school? Should we go to public school? And then you've got all the other medical. There's so much when you're bringing in kids that doesn't have to do with finances. And then if you put all of that combined and you have financial stress, you actually find people are less happy after having kids than they were before. So the Gottman Institute did a study, and they found that 67% of parents were less happy 3 years after having a baby. 67% of parents were less happy. That is just not supposed to happen. You come together, you love each other, you're going to have this amazing baby. It's going to look like you and it's going to act like her, and whatever. It's just this glorious time. And then fast forward 3 years and everybody's miserable. Why is that? So I think there's so many things that go into it. We know also, in addition to that stat, we also know that at least in America, divorce, or I guess money issues, are number one or number two reasons that people get divorced. And I think it's 40% of couples say that money fights or money disagreements have led to divorce in divorced couples. So if we know those two things are true, how do we mitigate the financial stress, make sure that that's ready to go and is completely buttoned up, so then couples can kind of focus on all the other stuff that comes around having a baby?
Yeah. It's a lot when you put it like that. And we might have to cut some of this out, because if we start putting out there that 67% of people are more unhappy, we're screwed as a Western society, aren't we? Because we're not going to have any kind of birth rates if we let people know the truth. I'm just,
But Tom, wait, are you happier after having kids?
yeah, I am happier now that I've become used to my new life. And there's a reason why I paused there, because there was a point that was running through, or a thought that was running through my mind. And I remember, and it was a previous episode on the podcast, we spoke to a grief specialist. And what was interesting is that grief comes in many forms. It's not just about, death. It can be about losing something. And I remember when I had my first child, it was actually an element of grieving the life I used to have. You mentioned time. I was time rich back then. And the freedom that presents. Yeah, I think at first it was really hard to wrap your head around a massive change in the way that you have to live your life. For me, once I got over that, yeah, I'm happier now. I can't really remember what it was like before, to be honest with you. So I don't know what the benchmark is anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably why I paused. So if my children listen to this, it's not because I don't love you guys. It was just that feeling of initial loss of a previous life, I think, might have something to do with it. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, that means so much. I mean, like, that is exactly right. And that is kind of the foundation of these ideas of what you can do to mitigate the financial stress. And it's all around Bowen's family systems theory. Does that ring a bell to
Okay.
you at all?
It doesn't. Now I'll
Okay.
get my notepad and pen out. Let's
All
go.
right. Okay. So this is the theoretical part of this, which I'm going to hopefully not bore you again with. But so what you just said is so perfect, because it does relate directly into this study and the research around Bowen's family systems theory. And what the systems theory says is, Tom, what's your wife's name?
Lindsay.
Lindsay. Okay. So Tom, before he met Lindsay, was his own dude. You know, he loved to do the things with the guys. He was into whatever you were into, and you had your own system. And think of it as like a solar system. And then there was Lindsay, and Lindsay was her own girl, and she loved to do what Lindsay did. And she had found what really made her happy and fulfilled, and they had their separate systems. Then Tom and Lindsay met and fell in love, and they become their own system. And there was a moment where Tom couldn't do whatever Tom wanted to do anymore. And he now was with Lindsay, and he wanted to make Lindsay happy. And so there was a moment of like this uneasy trying to figure out what life was like until you reached homeostasis. And then the two of you had all this time in the world. You went out to eat, you had a great time, you worked out, you went to work, you read, you did all of these wonderful things. And then Lindsay said she was pregnant. And then your system got thrown up again. Like it got off kilter. You didn't know what it was like because there was disruption into your system. And until you figured out what it was, Tom, Lindsay plus baby, you felt uneasy. You were unhappy. You didn't know what life looked like until you reached homeostasis again. And that system really felt like it was running again, where Tom could feel like he could bring the things in that made him fulfilled. Lindsay could do that same thing, and you were taking care of baby. And now you couldn't go back. Now your system is three. You're still Tom, the individual, but the system of the family is different. So that's kind of what Bowen family systems theory is all about, of like, you're a system. If there's something major that happens, a major event, or something is removed from a system or added to a system, it throws everybody off. And there's moments of time, and some take a longer period of time to reach homeostasis, but you will again. And then you just have to make sure that homeostasis is really what's fulfilling.
That really does resonate. And that really does resonate from an anecdote of my own personal experience. I think that's a really brilliant way of putting it. And I do wonder if there are listeners listening to this and going through similar changes in their lives. I maybe a message is, if it's feeling like a struggle, do keep giving it time. Is that fair? An equilibrium happens with time.
Yeah, it really does. And there are some steps that you can do or put into place to reach that homeostasis or that equilibrium faster than you normally would if you were just, you get baby, which is what my husband and I did. We had our firstborn. We have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, 2 girls. We have Loxley and Everly. And when Loxley was born, it was just like, whoa. I mean, we were older parents and we were both kind of set in our ways. And we weren't really, we thought we were prepared, but we weren't as prepared as we probably could have been. And it really shook us. And so there's a couple of things that we can do in preparation, both like emotionally, but also for this kind of conversation around finances, to mitigate stresses and be prepared for financial stresses before the baby comes, so you really can focus on the other things. So number one, the first thing that you can really work on is something called differentiation of self. How do you feel about that term?
That sounds quite involved. So this isn't going to be easy, is it? Necessarily, we might have to actually do some thinking to get these steps in place. All right, let's go with it. Differentiation of self.
Just a little bit of thinking, maybe a little bit of reflection. So what differentiation of self is basically saying, like, okay, Tom, you know who you are, you know your feelings, you know your emotions, you know your beliefs, and you're steadfast in those. You can say what those things are. And if you imagine yourself, I'm going to, like, bear with me here, Tom, for a second, but like, imagine yourself as a tree. Like, if you don't have strong differentiation of self, you might be a little tree, and any kind of wind that comes in could tip you over, or you don't know who you are by yourself. But if you're a strong tree with strong roots and you know who you are, a storm can come in and you might still be able to be flexible and you still might kind of go in with the wind, but you're going to stand strong. So that's really what differentiation of self is. And when it comes to finances, it's really about studying your past. I mean, it's really about having conversations. So one exercise that you can do, and I've done this and it's just really fascinating. So I'll use myself as an example. It's like a money tree. So you go back to your family tree and you look at your parents' side and you look at your grandparents and you think of the money behaviors that they had. So like you might have to have you might have to have conversations with your parents, and if your grandparents are still living, you have conversations with them. But what I found out from my mom was my grandma. She was total boss babe. Like, my grandma was like back in the day. So my grandpa served in World War II. He was a colonel in World War II. So he was away. While he was away, she opened up a grocery store. She opened up a salon. And any extra money she was getting from the businesses, she was secretly buying up real estate around her. And my grandpa didn't even know. She was just like, doing her thing, man. She's like real estate mogul, just like doing her thing. And he came home and didn't even really understand all the land that she'd bought. And then she started building multifamily units and collecting rent. And when she passed, my mom went over to help her, and my mom found thousands of dollars in shoe boxes that were downstairs and under her bed and hidden in the bathroom, places where she'd stashed money all around. So she was like a hoarder of cash. She was really driven by security. And I never got to talk to my Nana about that, but I think I could probably derive some reasons why of her husband being away, she had to provide for kids and never feeling like she had enough. So that behavior was passed down to my mom. My mom has some of that, and now I have some security issues with money. Like, will we be okay? Will we have enough? So that type of reflection and that understanding of me and taking that work. On my dad's side, it was much different. I have this great memory of my grandparents when they both finally retired, driving over to our house in this brand new convertible, a cherry red convertible, driving up with 3 panda bears in the back seat that were like human-sized panda bears, and honking that horn in that like bright red convertible car driving up, which was just like so epic, right? So like, they had different money behaviors. They had something that I would say is money freedom. Like, they wanted to use their money to have experiences. So these kind of things molded me, and they had really impactful stories in my life. And so really knowing that about me and knowing kind of what my family history is helps increase my differentiation of self. So I know when there's a new baby that comes and that throws off our homeostasis and it's creating some stress, and I don't know where the money, like, or do we have enough? Are we planned appropriately? That can make me understand, okay, I know what this is, and now we have to do these couple things for me to feel more comfortable.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it's actually, you've almost got quite a nice balance built into yourself from both sides of your family. But you mentioned that feeling of that want for security and having enough. How do you go about proving that you do?
Yeah, so I would say everybody's a little bit different. And Tom, I would guess that do you talk to your clients about this? Do you feel like some clients need more money in a savings account than other clients do?
Absolutely, and it is their history. It comes out when you actually try and drill down. And I usually find I work an awful lot with people from all age groups, but I find this really comes out for me in the retirement space when those are transitioning to not earning and having an income coming in. Those that really like that security really start to struggle with this idea of transitioning to being spenders rather than building a pot. So I see it come out then. So I absolutely, yeah, I see it.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, I don't think that they know a certain number or until that you sit down and you have the conversation. Like what is causing you financial stress? Well, are we going to be okay? Do we have enough? Okay, great. And tell me what enough means to you. Well, I guess, I mean, I want to have $100,000 in my savings account. Okay, why $100,000? I mean, everybody is a little bit different. For me, it's something different. You know, I mentioned I was in mortgage lending before, which was a 100% commission job. So it was feast or famine. You were either doing really, really well or, you know, there was no money coming in. And so for me, that also created this whole security driver of my own financial behavior. And I need so many months of my own spending in a checking account to feel good. Now, as a financial advisor, I know that that's not ideal. It's not optimizing my portfolio, but it doesn't matter if it's optimizing my portfolio if I'm stressed all the time, right?
Yeah, right. I see. This is a really, really good point, and I'm sorry to jump across. There is a difference between optimizing one's financial returns and actually optimizing one's experience along that journey as well. You know, as long as it's not completely detrimental. You've just given a great example. Yeah, you might have a bit more cash than you possibly need, but that enables you to thrive and, well, be a better parent, be a better at work, and ultimately could even improve your finances by the fact that you're better at work, for example. So yeah, that's a real point I want to stress to people, is that we do need to listen to our own experiences with the money. It's these rules of thumb don't necessarily work for everybody. We do
Right.
need to drill down to them. Sorry, I've cut across you. Carry on.
No, that's good. So I'm curious. I'm going to introduce 4 different money personalities to you, Tom,
Okay.
and then I want you to tell me which one you are. Okay.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. So personality number 1 is the one I've been telling you about. That one's mine. Security. Okay. Personality number 2 is freedom. So basically, like, you would say that money helps you create experiences, like your money behavior or personality. When you think about earning more, getting different, putting yourself in a different situation at work, all of it is around to like have different types of experience or different kind of things for you and your family. So that's freedom. Number 3 is power. So power is about using money as a vehicle to get where you want to go. So like, for example, if you wanted to get a really expensive education because you felt like that would get you to a place where you really wanted to be, that was important to you, you would use money as a tool, and power might be your money personality. And the 4th one is love. Love is really around like being extremely philanthropic or being that person that always buys the perfect gift for somebody. Like that you want to make somebody feel really special by spending money, and it doesn't matter how much money it is as long as you can make that person feel really special. So power, freedom, security, and love. Which one are you?
Oh, this is going to be really, really boring because I think the same as you, Katie. I'm fit really into one, and I know this because, well, this shouldn't be a surprise for those who listen. As tight as Tommo, it's a thing, right? It's because I want security with my finances. But what's really interesting is that I don't have that is my role in my relationship with my wife, because I'd say she's more of a 2 with a 4 as well. So with that idea of that love spending and also this freedom money and wanting to spend it on experiences, so she really does drag me to those areas, which I find really helpful. And I like to think that I provide some security mindset to things as well. So do you find there's a blend of those personalities can work well in a relationship?
Well, I hope so, because I married a freedom money personality for sure. And I think, the research actually shows that opposites don't actually really attract when you're looking at like politics or religion, but opposites usually attract when you're talking about money behaviors. And so that makes so much sense to me, that your wife would be freedom and you would be security. I'm security, my husband is freedom. But I didn't know those words. I didn't know that language around it for a couple of years into our marriage. And this kind of brings me to that second step that you can do when you're kind of mitigating financial stressors before having kids, or even if you already have kids while you have kids, is once you know who you are, so you've done the work about you, you understand you and why you're making the decisions, now you can practice partner financial empathy. So let me give you a quick story. So Costco, is the adult Disneyland. Like usually people either love it or hate it and have a great time at it. I used to love Costco until I started going with my new husband. Then it was miserable for me, because I didn't know it at the time, but I'm a security mindset when it comes to money. My husband's freedom. So we would walk into Costco and I'd be like, honey, this is a list. You do not deviate from the list. We are going to eggs. We are going to dairy. We are going to maybe chips. And then we're getting out of here. So he's like, yep, I'm on it. We got it. I know. I'm like, okay. We walk in and literally this is what happens in the first 30 seconds. Ooh. Ooh. And I'm like, we do not need 27 avocados. We don't need it. Why? And he just putting stuff in the cart, because in his mind, he's a freedom personality. So he just wants to know he can have it. He doesn't actually even have to buy it, but he wants to dream about it and talk about it. And me, when he's like, hey, let's buy this huge pool floaty that I think our nieces and nephews will love once a year. And I'm like, that's $120. Why would we? What are you? No. So it's just these conversations. But if now that I know that that's who he is, I have more empathy for his situation. Okay, my husband, he's just dreaming right now. Let's be patient. Let's let him dream. Let's talk about the things he wants to do. It doesn't mean that it's actually money going out of our checking account. It's just him, having these great thoughts about the future, and I can share in that.
That's fascinating. So rather than embrace it for a period and rather than quashing it, I'm going to be quite frank here. I can absolutely fall in the trap when I hear my wife Lindsay talking about holidays or going out for the day, and I'm thinking, but we're just trying to save a bit of money for a bit of work on the house at the moment, and rather than jump on it and sort of douse that flame of what that dreaming that's going on, just let it bubble away for a little bit and then let them enjoy it. Okay, I'm going to take that on board. That's a really good way of looking at it. And I'm laughing a little bit because Chris won't mind me saying this, but he is absolutely your husband in the fact that when he goes to Costco, it's in the early stages of the podcast, he went to Costco and bought a canoe. randomly, thinking he could use it at a local lake. Turns out the lake doesn't allow canoes. So he had this thing just sort of sitting in his garden collecting rainwater for about 2 years before he sold it. So it was an ongoing joke. So yeah, he might listen to this and have a good chuckle to that story. And I appreciate you might have some other steps to talk about, but I'd love to ask you, we've talked about where there is opposites and they may well complement, but you also need to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
What is your experiences of people who are the same?
Yeah, I think the same is not a bad thing. The same can be a really wonderful thing, and it can actually reduce a lot of financial stress or like alleviate some financial stressors. But in any one of those money personalities that we talked about, there's a healthy level and there's an unhealthy level. So it's a spectrum. Like you and me, Tom, like if we were married, like for example, two security personalities, we might go way into the unhealthy realm where we have just like built this, kingdom that's a huge number in the background, but we are just eating rice and beans every night and we are not enjoying it. Like we are just like the numbers all look good and we feel really great about that, but we are like my grandmother, we're hoarding money. We're not actually experiencing it. We're not like living life. And so a healthy security mindset is being prepared, having savings, having an investment plan, finding ways to cut costs if that's your thing, if you get excited about that, but like not taking it to the unhealthy level. And so I think when you have personalities that are similar, it can be a really good thing. It can alleviate some stress, but you can also feed into each other and you have more of this. Like you said, your wife kind of pulls you over to the experiences side. So you have more possibility of kind of getting to those unhealthy levels. Like, for example, if you put two people that have love as a driver, you might be spending all of your money, giving it all away. And the unhealthy aspect of love is like trying to buy somebody's love too, which can be really unhealthy. So I think you just have to balance it.
Okay. And do you have any tips for how to find that balance?
Yeah, I think just kind of what we were talking about, really get to know yourself. So like, Tom, it would be interesting for you to kind of look at your family tree and look at your early money behaviors and understand why your security and then how you mitigate that. Like, okay, how do I keep a healthy level of security? And then talk to your wife about the same thing. So that's like, if you increase your differentiation of self, the second step is to like really practice that empathy with your partner, that financial empathy. So like, knowing what your partner, what makes them happy, what makes them fulfilled, working together, listening, doing a lot of listening, and then creating some centered values. So from there, you can start dreaming and making goals. So like, for example, if your security mindset, but you do want to have this second vacation beach home for your family and your kids to grow up in, and that's going to really make your wife happy, then what you can start to do is say, okay, this together is where we want to go. Now, for us to get there, we need to have this money for a down payment, but we're working towards that so we can have that dream that you want. So I think that's one way to do it, is to be really aware, self-aware of your own, talk with your partner about where they're at and what's important and how they will feel fulfilled, and then dream together and have goals that you can achieve together.
I love that. And of course, if you've got a financial planner supporting you through that, obviously it's going to make that a hell of a lot easier, isn't it? Of having that third party.
That's exactly right. Especially with two busy parents, and trying to like juggle all of the things, because you're not going to have just one goal. You're going to have, I want that vacation home, but I also want to pay for education for my kids. And I want to make sure that we do this today, and all of these goals together. If you have a really good financial planner that you're working with, they can keep that organized. They can get you in a plan. They can give you, I like to say, put you on a savings budget, not a spending budget, but a savings budget, figuring out how much to save to each different goal, so you can actually attain what your dreams are.
Absolutely. And have you got any other practical steps that you can think of that would be helpful for those that are these young busy families?
Yeah. So I would say, like, in that process of 3 steps, the third step is just to take action. So it's really tactical. I can send you a checklist of different things to do in preparation for kids or when you have young kids. And these are conversations about, like, what do we want to do for our child's education? And I don't know about you, Tom, but when working with couples, this is a huge conversation. There's lots of couples that want to pay everything. There's times when the couples are not aligned at all. Like, one went to an Ivy League school and their parents paid for everything. The other one went to state school and put themselves through college, and they felt really strongly about that, and all the different options in between. And it can be expensive saving for secondary education. So, like, having some really specific conversations up front of just understanding, you don't have to solve everything, but just getting those conversations going, and then having, like, some conversations around, okay, do we both want to work forever? One part of the couple want to stay at home. What are we going to do for daycare? Are we going to have a babysitter? Are we going to go to daycare? What are we going to do? And then also the things like healthcare. Are our kids protected? Life insurance. Should we think about life insurance for the parents? Like, these actionable items that a lot of people will think are boring, but it's like anything. Like, in a diet, like, yes, vegetables are boring, but man, if you eat your vegetables every day and you take vegetables and you eat vegetables versus sugar, it's going to be boring. But you know what's not going to be boring is when you've lost 10 pounds after 4 weeks. That's pretty exciting. So, like, some of those, like, real actionable items that aren't super fun, but once you get them done, you can, like, put it away, and you can focus on the things that actually really matter because you're ready and you're prepared and you're organized. You can feel really good about accomplishing it together.
Yeah, I love that. I love that those little actions that are going to be far easier to do before you become really busy with young children. But that's not to say that if you haven't done them yet, it's okay. We can carve out some time to get it done.
Yeah.
But I find working with younger parents that sometimes it is the more boring stuff that needs to get done and needs to get ticked off. Because usually you're in a stage of your life where you are actually a little bit more vulnerable to things that can happen. And I'm thinking in particular, you mentioned insurances, and if you're not getting that covered at this age, you really are vulnerable. A lot of what you're saying resonates with my own experiences, Katie. I must admit, I hadn't realised how much of a security type 1 person I was until I started doing this. Actually, started working with Ovation almost 10 years ago and doing this podcast, is actually realising all the joy that can come from money. Not necessarily from money, but working out what you really enjoy or want to do and spending your money on that and being a bit more relaxed about doing so.
All
But
right.
it's tough though, right? Because you need
Yeah.
somebody to pull you in that direction sometimes.
Oh yeah, you definitely do. And I think finding what makes Tom feel secure, like finding what you can feel really good about and what your security number or situation looks like. And then once you found that and you know you're good, your foundation has been met, and then allowing yourself to enjoy it a little bit more and letting your wife pull you in that direction. And how do you let money kind of help you facilitate this fulfilled lifestyle, this financial well-being? If Chris was here, we would definitely talk about his book, I think. But just like, exploring that side of you, which can be really fun.
Yeah, amen. And I think it's exactly what this podcast is all about. Is trying to get people to think more positively about their finances and ultimately, figuring out what they want and putting their money towards that. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Katie. Now, before you go, we like to ask every guest if they have, I've alluded to it in the interview already, a tight ass Tommo tip. We did give you a little bit of a warning to see if you had anything for us. So I was wondering if you wanted to share your tip with us.
Okay, so I do have one. I think it's one, I don't know, you can be the judge, but I don't know if anybody else has this issue. Going out to eat. So, like, having a date night is so expensive now. Like cost of food and drinks, it has just like skyrocketed. It's just like gone through the roof. In fact, like if I want to order a nice cocktail at dinner and my husband does too, it can be $20 a drink. So like if we had 2 drinks over a 3-hour dinner or something, plus tip, it's going to add about $100 of extra expense to an already expensive dinner bill. So what we've decided and what we've started doing is we still go out on our date nights. We still go and enjoy food because that's one of our favorite things to do. Have some time away with the kids. We get a babysitter. We go out with friends. We enjoy a meal. We come home and we make our drinks at home afterwards. So we order water or soda water with lime at dinner. We really focus on the food and the conversation. And then afterwards, when we get home, we pour ourselves a cocktail, we have dessert, we extend our date after the kids are in bed to the patio where we can further conversation, and we can have a drink for about quarter of the price. So
I love it. That is definitely qualifies. That definitely qualifies. I think that's a wonderful idea. Save money on a taxi, save money on drink, and you get to extend the evening.
Exactly. No Uber is necessary. You're feeling good, and you might only have one and you feel great the next day. You can go for a run.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, sure. Why not? Or have to get up with the 2 little ones that you have to then make sure survive for another 24 hours. No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. I do really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And yeah, I've got a notepad with scribbled notes that I'm going to go away and utilize this end.
Good. I'm happy. I think, Tom, for the record, I think you were a great interviewer.
You hear that, Chris? Your job may be safe, but at least we've got a stand-in who can do a half decent job. So thank you, Katie. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, first thing I have to say is, Tommo, congratulations on popping your interview cherry. Can I say that? Well, I've said it now anyway. Congratulations on a very good interview. Fascinating stuff there. And there's a few things that emerge from that interview that I'd like to comment on. One of them is this bombshell information that 67% of people are unhappy or less happy after they've had children. It reminds me, I've recently been on a family holiday down in Cornwall, and I saw my lovely niece and her husband. They've got 2 kids who are nearly 4 and nearly 2. Delightful children, but obviously being of that age, they are a bit of a handful. And Philip, my niece's husband, lovely man, very calm man, and a very good parent as well. He told me this story about how when my niece was heavily pregnant with their second child, they were at a playground and they were playing in a sandpit. And there was another young couple there that had a son who was the same age as their son, nearly 4, or in fact, it would have been about 3 then, but also a newborn child as well. So obviously they were just slightly ahead of my niece and her husband. And Philip said, "Oh, right, how's it going? We are seconds due any day now. How's it going?" And the wife went, "Oh, it's a struggle, but yeah, it's great. We're really enjoying it." And behind her back, the husband just sat there and drew his finger across his and just shook his head in a way that suggested he wasn't finding it quite so enjoyable. And I was again reminded, so this is a bit of personal news, I've just become a granddad.
Yay!
Yeah. So that's really nice as well.
I want to just link what Katie had to say, which was so interesting, back to the last episode about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because as you go up through those hierarchy of needs, you meet your food necessity, you meet your shelter. But getting to that top level of self-actualization and creativity, we can do it, not always for a long time. And then kids come along and wow, you go back down, don't you? You go hurtling back down that hierarchy of needs. And what she was talking about is actually, I think, a very similar message that we were giving in the last episode, which is you've got to work at this stuff. You've got to try and understand who you are. I loved the bit about understanding the person that you are. She went on to talk about with money, but I think that applies generally. Who am I? Because you can easily lose that once kids come along and there's sleep deprivation and all the other things happen. So it's important to do that work, to understand who you are. And as a couple, because boy, there's some pressure put on relationships when those kids come along, isn't there? And understanding who you are and who your partner is and discussing it together. And I think that she had some wonderful stuff to talk about.
Excellent. Okay, now, before we close this podcast, there's something very important that we haven't done. We didn't talk about Titus Tommo. Now, we had a tip there from Katie, and I'm just wondering if, Tom, you've got anything that you can add to that discussion in terms of being the monarch of meanness, which we know you are, the champion of cheapness, can bring to the table.
Well, I do, because you know how frustrated and annoyed I was when you moved straight to the interview and didn't give me space for me to do the Titus Tommo. So yes, David.
Furious. Oh, I've never seen you so furious.
No, I did have one lined up, and if I don't say it, I'll forget it for next time. So we'll do it, and it's from a very good friend of mine, a chap called Adam Harrison. If you're listening, Adam, I hope you are, because again, this is a test to see if you do. He's based in Bristol, often goes into London and has to get Great Western Rail is our rail line, and I'm pretty sure this probably crosses over to all rail lines in the UK. And he mentioned Great Western Railways delay repay, and this is great. I didn't realise it existed. You can get refunds or portional refunds if you've got delays of over 15 minutes. So 15 to 30 minutes, you get 25% of your ticket back. 30 minutes to an hour, 50%. Over an hour late, you get 100% of your ticket price back. So you imagine how many times you sat there and it's 15 minutes late. You are entitled to get 25% of that ticket back. So given how expensive train travel is anyway, I think that's going to be a very good saving for a lot of people. Brilliant. And unfortunately, many of our listeners wouldn't have ever got to hear that tip because they would have switched off by now due to the interview I just did. Yeah, can anyone notice the imposter syndrome knocking around?
No,
I'll get used to this. Thank you.
You did a great job.
You did a great job. Look, we've all said you were great. We're not going to carry on saying it.
No, please, come on. I need my ego massaged.
You're great. You're great. You're great. You're great.
There you go.
I hope the rest of you think that Tom is as equally as great as we think he is. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and I hope that you'll tune in once again to listen. Thank you. Goodbye.
If you want to be notified of upcoming podcasts, make sure you click the subscribe button. For more information on the topics discussed in today's podcast and to purchase a copy of the Financial Wellbeing book, please visit www.financialwell-being.co.uk. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas on financial well-being. You can send us an email at contact@financialwell-being.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter @FinWellbeing. Chris is Ovation Chris, and David is @Dave_Backwell. This has been an Ovation Finance production. Thanks for listening to the Financial Wellbeing podcast. More interesting than you might think.